Welcome to this edition of the Sea Trade Maritime Masterclass series. My name is Emma Howell and I'm a director at Sea Trade Maritime, talking today to Pam Kern, Maritime Mental Health Therapist. An Ivy League clinically trained and licensed trauma psychotherapist, Pam is a former seafarer who is dedicated to the provision of innovative maritime mental health prevention and intervention programs. Pam has been on several Sea Trade Maritime conference panels, and having seen her speak, I reached out as an ideal candidate for our masterclass series, giving us some insight to her profession and the challenges faced within the industry. Welcome today, Pam.
Thanks, Emma. So great to be here.
I'm going to start off with question number one. So, talk to us about the reality of seeking and receiving treatment for mental health and well-being in the maritime industry.
The maritime industry is deeply rooted in tradition. I call it the trenches of tradition with air quotes, that usually the environment and culture it's always been done this way. So when we introduce something new, shifts of change take a while to grow. So there are some barriers into receiving treatment for mental health and well-being. So an example, if we break our arm, it's acceptable. But the moment you say, I'm just sad and depressed today, there's stigma to it. It is getting better. From when I sailed in 1996 to 2012, there is more awareness. There's more awareness as well, depending on the country you come from. But in many countries, there isn't, and in particular, on ships. I would love to see us normalizing mental health and to treat crew where they feel safe to speak up, because mental health and well-being means different things to different people, where they come from, even the onboard culture. So how can we overcome the badge of honor to push through, to fake it till we make it? A conversation can be start to a cure. Maybe we could be the first person to ask somebody, are you okay? Can you imagine the relief of somebody else saying that first? It takes the pressure off of the fear and vulnerability to speak up, and we can normalize it, that it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to speak up. But a conversation can be start to a cure.
That's so interesting. And actually, I'm going to give an example. You were speaking at CMA Shipping in the States, and one of the questions you asked a filled conference room of maybe 150 people is who here suffers from any mental health challenges? And only one person in the room put their hand up. And I think you cited that example as the reality is it's not just one person, but only one person was brave enough to actually say, this is me.
Yeah, indeed. I do that exercise often. So I've done it in 3 different countries, the Philippines, Dubai, and in the US. And it's always a room full of people where I ask, how many people took medication today? And a lot of people raise their hand. I'd say the majority of the audience does. But then when they put their hands down, I say, well, of those that took medication today, how many took medication to treat a mental health condition? And usually what I will get is the sound of crickets, silence, and one person, only one in all 3 countries raise their hand. And it's to prove the stigma is still there. So if the stigma is here on land, can you imagine what it's like in a contained environment on a ship?
No, that's desperately sad, actually.
I do, though, get a lot of people who come up to me afterwards and say, I suffer from depression and anxiety, but I wasn't going to raise my hand. And, I appreciate their vulnerability, whether it's in public or in private, that, they took the initiative, to speak up. We're not there yet, but I think the more people talk about it, the more we normalize that mental health is just a natural extension of our overall health, and that it's okay not to be okay, versus everyone kind of faking it until we make it. It's kind of, I make the equivalent in the States. We're very common as an introduction to say, hi, how are you? And it kind of goes out with no emotion that Do we really care how they are? But if somebody responded, oh, I got a call from my kid's teacher today. I had a bad day at work and just my life is falling apart. How would you respond to that? Usually our response is not that. And it's just, I'm fine. How are you? And just that casual conversation. So how can we be more real and relatable and authentic to our everyday lives that includes mental health?
And do you think that's one of the barriers that hinders a healthy approach to mental health?
Indeed, yes. Stigma, faking it until you make it, badge of honor. You are considered tough if you are on a ship, if you are sticking it out. There's a lot of vulnerability and fear. Your paycheck might not only support yourself as an individual, but your internal and external, family, neighborhood, community at large. So there's a lot riding on that vulnerability. So to speak up it goes against that. And in humans in nature, we're social beings and we want to be connected. Vulnerability and fear is the opposite of that. That almost feels disconnected. So we tend not to do that. We want to be just like everybody else. We want to be part of the group. And if we can overcome that stigma and that we all experience that and that it's okay, we have a lot of work to do, but there is indeed progress. And I would say there's progress, not perfection.
I guess if those barriers are across a global workforce, they're exacerbated when you're at sea. So as an industry, are we responding to seafarer challenges and opinions when choosing a mental health and well-being approach?
Right. Great question. We are meeting them, yes, but I would like to level up. Are we meeting them where they're at? Not where we want them to be. So I do find that there are a lot of approaches that take the land base and they apply it to ships and they say, this is going to work. Or perhaps maybe that provider doesn't know maritime or has never sailed before. So I would like to see more of a lens of looking at a seafarer's life and their vulnerabilities and then working around that versus thinking maybe a land-based approach or, the provider's approach is preferred. I'm really fortunate. I work with some amazing maritime mental health providers around the world, in particular, Penny Blackburn, Rachel Williams, Carrie Summers, Camille DeBont, and we try to help educate the maritime industry in what to look for in a maritime mental health provider, as well as what are the best approaches if you have not sailed before and you're a maritime mental health provider, and to meet seafarers where they're at. That's really what I find is the challenges, as well as, looking at seafarers who don't have days off. It's the last industry in the world where we don't have days off.
I'm guessing there's only so much you can do to influence that, such as talking at shipping events where you've got the ear of ship owners. But what more can we do to make sure that seafarers are heard and understood and that provision is put in place for them to get that support if required?
Yeah, I call it the 3 A's: awareness, advocacy to action. I think we're really great at creating awareness and advocacy, but then when to put it in action in an industry that's deeply rooted in tradition, that takes a lot of time. Keep speaking it at conferences so we can make mental health cool to talk about, not this, here we go again with mental health, because we all experience it. And to overcome the barriers of mental health in order to stop its negative trajectory. I do work with Port Medical based in Houston, Texas, with Dean Karasis, and we're in the process of building an app where the app will detect mental health concerns. Seafarers will complete just a very brief survey just to meet them where they're at, designed specifically by me as a former seafarer, and knowing what questions to ask to kind of see little blips like boop in the trajectory, while on board a ship. because you want to protect, the largest asset, both, the human as well as ship. And I feel that if we go deeper to detect risk, kind of to disrupt the negative trajectory of mental health, and, it's good to save minds as well as money, for the company. But it's a very tough thing to do because not a lot of seafarers want to speak up, and how to meet them where they're at.
Pam, we've touched on the fact that you were previously a seafarer. I mean, can you tell us a bit about your own experience and what prompted you to take the decision to make mental health your focus for the maritime sector?
So I started sailing in 1996. And I worked at the front desk where everything happens. This is on cruise ships. And you would get comments, concerns, complaints. So at that time in 96, the industry was not yet mass market like it is today. So we only had service complaints. But as the industry expanded, we started seeing more and more unique situations that I was not trained for. And we had interesting stories of guests as well as crew experiencing social, emotional, dysfunction. We had fires, floods, plane crashes, unfortunately, suicide, domestic violence. And these are things you just don't think of that would happen on board a cruise ship. So I started experimenting with interventions with my own team as I became a guest relations manager. I managed a team of 16 at the front desk and a private lounge for suite guests. So the experiment was I gave my team days off. I gave them the first day off when they joined the ship. So if they were traveling from Asia, probably 24 hours, I made sure they didn't work the first day. It's very common that once they immediately get to the ship, they start work, but they would arrive in the morning at 6 a.m. without sleeping, perhaps maybe, no time in between landing in the US and then joining the ship. I also would send my team outside on deck. Some of them didn't go outside for days on end. And I started to see these small interventions with really big impact. And it fascinated me, like, how can I take this further? So I asked my company if I could leave to go back to get my master's in clinical social work at Columbia. I studied the world of work and human behavior in the workplace. And then I went back to implement what I learned. So I kind of take a 3-lens approach as a former seafarer, as a trauma psychotherapist, as well as I am a spouse of an active seafaring captain. And I put all 3 lenses together to meet seafarers where they're at through awareness, advocacy, and hopefully action.
And do you think perhaps everything has taken a step back since the pandemic, or do you think the pandemic has actually helped put the spotlight on mental health concerns?
Indeed, I think it's leveled it up. It has put the spotlight on it, and the awareness certainly has made it more in the forefront. I just hope as we pull back now from COVID, that awareness also doesn't diminish. So I'll give you an example. I was in New York City for 9/11, and I found it profound how New Yorkers not only slowed down, but they were really kind to each other, opening doors, talking to each other. And the months since the years went on, it's kind of, we went back to our status quo, if you will. And I certainly don't want this awareness to also diminish, that we can keep the conversation going, because mental health doesn't stop after a pandemic.
And also, we've talked a little bit about how you get your message out there. Why is it important for event organisers, such as ourselves, to provide a platform for discussing what more can be done?
I will revert back to the 3 A's: awareness, advocacy, and action, because organizers give us the platform to take the reality from ships to the industry that might not have been reached through other platforms. In particular, Crew Connect Global, CMA, are amazing conferences and platforms to not only network, but to get the stories out there. I can't tell you how many countless times, after I speak, people come up and I never knew this. And I work in this sector. So it magnifies what I call the ripple effect, that one story, one speech can have a ripple effect for months and years to come.
And if you could look towards 2030, what would your hope be for this particular challenge within the industry?
Awesome question. My personal mission, days off. Days off. I mean, I get a lot of pushback. That's impossible, can never be done. We've done it on a cruise line with major departments, being able to streamline the work to make it work. Usually the pushback I will get, we need more people and we already have a shortage. If we are able to align technology and not remove people from their jobs, but help release some of the responsibilities so crew members can have more time off. How do we make it work? But we basically need to shake it all up. So kind of similar to a snow globe, if you will. You have the water and the snow and you shake it all up and then it kind of all falls. We need to reorganize everything. It is possible to do, but it takes a lot of work. And leaders and stakeholders need to feel psychologically safe to do that. Psychological safety is also really important. Oh, am I going to be the only one that's going to do this? Will this fail? How will my company look? It is possible, but it is a huge change. Days off should be a right, not a privilege. The human body was not meant to work 12, 14 hours a day without a day off every day for 6 months, 8 months, even 3 months. The research that I did on cruise ships, it takes about 1 week to 1 week and a half, and you already started to become fatigued. How to break that cycle on a more wider, broader scope versus just having a few hours off, having a full 24 hours off, which we say is impossible. But if we can have autonomous ships and we can have the International Space Station, we can figure out days off in maritime.
As always, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that as an event organizer and a communications platform, we can help you to spread some of that message and reinforce how important some of these, as you said, small but significant changes can be made within the industry. So I thank you again for your time today, Pam.
Thank you so much, Emma. I really appreciate the platform to create the awareness, advocacy, and action.